Case file 007, now open. 5 people entered the deep woods. What they found there wasn't supposed to exist. When civilization ends and the tree line begins, the rules change. Subscribe, because some trails lead places maps don't show. August 2022. Rowan Merrick was solo hiking the Cascade Range in Washington. Experienced backpacker, proper gear, GPS device, satellite communicator, everything by the book. Day 3 of a 5-day trek. The trail was well marked, maintained, familiar from previous years. Around 2 p.m., Rowan noticed something strange. 20 feet to her right, running parallel through the trees. Another trail. Identical width. Same markers. Same worn dirt path. She stopped, checked her map. Only one trail existed in this area. But there were clearly 2. She walked to the parallel trail. Boot prints in the dirt, fresh. Her size, her tread pattern, her prints on a trail that shouldn't exist. Rowan's training kicked in. Stay calm, navigate logically. She checked her GPS. It showed her position on the correct trail. The parallel path didn't appear on any map or satellite view. She continued on the marked trail, keeping the parallel path in view through the trees. Every turn she made, the parallel path matched. Same curves, same elevation changes. Perfect mirror. At 4 p.m., she saw someone hiking the parallel trail. A woman. Same build as Rowan. Same backpack color. Same hiking clothes. The woman was too far away to see clearly through the trees, but she moved with Rowan's gait, her rhythm. Rowan called out. "Hey!" The woman stopped, turned her head. Even from this distance, Rowan could see. The woman had her face. The doppelganger stared at Rowan for 3 seconds, then continued hiking, moving ahead now, faster than Rowan. Rowan's pulse hammered. She tried to rationalize. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, altitude. But her water was full, her vitals steady. She felt fine physically. She picked up her pace, trying to keep the other woman in sight through the trees. The parallel trail started diverging, slowly curving away from the main trail. The woman followed it, disappearing deeper into the forest. Rowan had a choice: stay on the marked trail or follow. She stayed on the marked trail. Smart decision. But now she was alone in a way that felt different. Not just solitude, absence. Like something that should be there wasn't. At 6 p.m., she made camp at a designated site, set up her tent, started a small camp stove for dinner. Across the clearing, maybe 40 yards into the trees, smoke. Another campfire, in the exact same clearing layout, mirror position. Rowan grabbed her flashlight and walked toward the smoke. The trees thickened. She pushed through underbrush that shouldn't be this dense in a maintained area. Found nothing. No camp. No fire. No sign anyone had been there. But when she turned back toward her camp, she saw it. Her tent. Her fire. Exactly where she'd left them. And across the clearing in the other direction, another tent. Another fire. Same equipment, same setup. 2 camps, 1 clearing. Rowan approached the second camp slowly. Everything was identical to hers. Same tent model, same sleeping bag visible through the mesh door, same camp stove. She unzipped the tent, her belongings inside. Her sleeping bag, her clothes, even her journal, open to today's entry. In her handwriting, Day 3, saw something impossible today. Don't trust the parallel path. But Rowan hadn't written that. Her journal was in her tent, across the clearing. She backed away, returned to her original tent, checked her journal. Blank page for today. She hadn't written anything yet. Rowan made a decision. Pack everything. Hike out. Night hiking was dangerous, but staying felt worse. She struck camp in 15 minutes, started down the trail with her headlamp. After 30 minutes, she reached a fork. Left continued on the main trail. Right diverged into unmapped territory. A sign stood at the fork. Official Parks Department marker. Main trail with an arrow pointing right. Wrong. The main trail went left. Rowan knew this trail. She'd hiked it 4 times. She checked her GPS. It showed the trail continuing left, but the sign pointed right. She looked down both paths. They appeared identical in her headlamp beam. Then she saw her, the woman, standing on the right path, facing Rowan, 30 feet away. Close enough now to see clearly Rowan's face, Rowan's body, Rowan's clothes. But smiling in a way Rowan never smiled, wider, wrong. "This way," the doppelganger said in Rowan's voice. "The trail continues this way. You're not real. Neither are you, not anymore. You crossed over when you saw the parallel path. You've been hiking the wrong trail for 6 hours. This is the way back." "Liar." The doppelganger's smile widened impossibly. "Then go left. See what's there. See where the wrong trail leads." Rowan hesitated. Every instinct screamed to go left. Trust the GPS. Trust her knowledge. But something else whispered. What if the doppelganger was telling the truth? She compromised, took 3 steps down the left path. Her headlamp illuminated the trail ahead. It ended. 50 feet ahead, the path simply stopped. Trees grew across where the trail should continue. Not overgrown, like the trail had never extended beyond that point. Impossible. She'd hiked this trail dozens of times. It continued for 3 more miles to the ranger station. She turned around. The doppelganger was closer now, 10 feet away. "You see, the world changed when you saw me. Your trail doesn't exist anymore. Only mine, only the parallel path, and it only goes one direction." What direction? Deeper. Rowan ran, not down either path, straight into the woods, crashing through underbrush, branches tearing at her clothes. Her GPS shrieked alarms. She was off trail, moving into uncharted territory. She didn't care. She ran for 20 minutes until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. Collapsed against a tree, checked her GPS, no position. The device showed her as a blinking dot on a blank screen. No trails, no topography, no landmarks, just her, alone in white digital space. She looked up. The forest around her was wrong. The trees were too uniform, planted in perfect rows, the ground too flat, the sky above the canopy too dark, despite her watch showing 8 p.m. Should still have some twilight. She was somewhere else, somewhere that looked like a forest, but wasn't. Movement in the trees, multiple figures, all converging on her position. Women, men, children, all wearing hiking gear from different eras, 1970s, 1980s, 2000s, all with the same wrong smile. "Welcome," they said in unison. "You found the parallel path. Now you walk it forever, just like us." "No. Yes. This forest takes one hiker every season, replaces them, sends a copy back. The copy finishes the hike, goes home, lives their life, and the real person stays here, walking, forever, feeding the trail. Why? The forest is hungry, always hungry. It needs those who know the trails, who love the woods, who belong here. So it creates the parallel path, and whoever sees it crosses over, becomes part of the eternal hike." The figures surrounded her, reached out with hands that looked human but felt like bark. Rowan screamed. The scream echoed, and continued echoing even after her mouth closed. The figures stepped back. confused. Rowan's satellite communicator, still clipped to her pack. She'd pressed the SOS button when she fell. The beacon transmitted. Somewhere, somehow, the signal reached out. The figures shrieked. Inhuman sounds. The forest around her wavered like a projection losing focus. Light penetrated the canopy. Real light. Helicopter searchlight. "No!" the figures screamed. "She's ours!" But the forest was losing its grip. The impossible geometry couldn't maintain itself against the intrusion of real technology, real rescue. Rowan felt herself falling. Not physically, dimensionally, dropping through layers of reality that shouldn't exist. She hit dirt, real dirt. The forest snapped back to normal. Trees in natural positions, sky the right color, sounds of a helicopter above. The rescue team found her 3 hours later, disoriented, dehydrated, but alive. She told them she'd gotten lost. Panic. Took a wrong turn. They believed her. GPS malfunction. Happens sometimes in the mountains. You're lucky you had the beacon. Rowan never told the truth, never mentioned the parallel path, never explained the 3 days of GPS logs that showed her hiking in circles in an area that doesn't exist on any map. She doesn't hike alone anymore, won't go into deep woods. November 2021, opening day of deer season. Kellen Voss was hunting family land in eastern Kentucky. 200 acres of hardwood forest his grandfather had bought in 1960. Kellen had hunted here since childhood, knew every ridge, hollow, and deer trail. He arrived at his tree stand before dawn, climbed 20 feet up an oak, settled in, perfect position overlooking a valley where deer traveled. As the sun rose, Kellen noticed the forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds. No squirrels. No wind. Complete silence except one sound. Breathing. Deep. Slow. Like something massive, inhaling and exhaling. Kellen assumed it was his own breath, amplified by the morning stillness. He controlled his breathing, made himself quiet. The sound continued. Rhythmic. Steady, not his. He scanned the valley. No movement, no animals. The forest stood frozen. Then he noticed the trees. They were moving, barely perceptible. The trunks expanding and contracting in sync with the breathing sound. Inhale. The bark swelled slightly. Exhale. It settled, every tree in sight, breathing together like a single living thing with hundreds of lungs. Kellen's rational mind rejected this. Trick of the light. Morning fog creating illusions. But he'd hunted for 30 years. He knew what he was seeing. The trees were breathing. He decided to leave. Something was wrong. Hunt a different section of property. Kellen climbed down from his stand carefully. As his boots hit the ground, the breathing stopped. Instant silence. Not even his own movements made sound. His boots should crunch leaves. They didn't. No audio, like the forest had swallowed all sound. He walked toward his ATV parked half a mile away, every step silent. No birds started, no insects hummed. Dead quiet. Then the trees moved, not swaying, repositioning. Kellen glanced behind him. The oak he'd been hunting from was now 10 feet to the left. He was certain of its previous position, had marked it mentally relative to other landmarks. It had moved. He walked faster. Didn't run. Never run in the woods. That's how people get hurt. But moved with purpose. The trees continued shifting. Subtle. Every time he glanced away and back, something had changed position. Trunks slightly closer together, paths narrowing, the forest tightening around him. His ATV should be ahead. He'd parked it at a familiar intersection of game trails. Kellen had used that spot 100 times. It wasn't there, just more trees. Identical forest in every direction. His ATV was gone. The trail was gone. Everything was trees and silence, and that breathing starting again. Inhale, the trunks expanded. Exhale, they contracted. Closer now, definitely closer. Kellen pulled out his compass. Needle spun without settling. His GPS unit. No satellites found. He climbed a tree to get perspective. 20 feet up. Should be able to see the valley, the ridgeline, his barn a mile east. Saw only forest. Endless trees in every direction. No breaks. No clearings, no buildings, just trees extending to the horizon. Impossible. This property was 200 acres, surrounded by farms and county roads. But from this height, infinite forest. The tree he'd climbed breathed. He felt the trunk swell against his body, felt it exhale. The bark moved like skin over ribs. He scrambled down, fell the last 8 feet. His ankle twisted. Pain shot up his leg. The breathing grew louder, faster, like the forest was excited, like it knew he was injured. Kellen limped in what he hoped was east. His ankle screamed with each step. The trees closed in. Branches reached lower. Roots rose higher, forming obstacles. He tripped over a root and fell, face down in leaves, ankle throbbing, and beneath the ground, movement, vibration, something massive shifting below. The forest floor breathed too. Rising and falling, he was lying on something alive. Kellen stood, ignoring the pain, ran, limped, crashed through brush that hadn't been there moments before. Found a clearing, small, 20 feet across. In the center, bones, deer bones, dozens of skeletons arranged in a circle, skulls facing outward, rib cages intact, like something had consumed them in place and left only bones. But more disturbing, the bones were arranged, deliberately, not natural death. Something had posed them. The breathing surrounded the clearing, coming from the tree line, from below, from above, omnidirectional. The entire forest inhaling and exhaling around this small circle of death. Then Kellen understood. This was a feeding ground. The forest breathed because it lived, and it fed on whatever entered. The deer hadn't died of natural causes. They'd been kept here, consumed slowly, while still alive. The trees breathed because they had lungs, and he was standing in the forest's mouth. The clearing began shrinking, trees moving inward, inch by inch, tightening the circle. The bones at his feet started sinking into the ground, being absorbed. Kellen fired his rifle into the air. 3 shots, universal distress signal. The sound didn't carry. It died immediately. Swallowed by the breathing forest, he reloaded, fired into a tree trunk. The tree bled, red sap, too thick, pulsing from the wound in rhythm with the breathing. The forest felt pain. Kellen fired into multiple trees, creating wounds. The breathing hitched, stuttered. The trees stopped moving. He understood, heard it enough, disrupt the rhythm, break the collective breathing. He emptied his rifle into the surrounding trees, methodically, creating damage. The breathing became ragged, uneven. The trees shuddered. The ground stopped rising and falling. In the disruption, Kellen saw it, a gap between trees, small, but leading somewhere different, less dense. He ran through the gap, his ankle barely holding. 20 yards, 50 yards, the breathing behind him trying to restart, trying to sink. He burst through a line of trees and stumbled onto asphalt. A county road, real, actual civilization. A truck was approaching. Kellen waved frantically. The driver stopped. "You okay, buddy? Hunting accident? Get me away from those trees, now." The driver helped him into the truck. They drove a mile before Kellen looked back. The tree line behind them appeared normal. Regular forest, regular spacing. But even from a mile away, he could see it, the forest expanding and contracting, slowly, rhythmically, still breathing. His family sold the property 6 months later. Kellen never told them why he insisted on selling, just said he was done hunting. September 2023. Lennox Farrow was summiting Mount Katahdin in Maine, northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. She'd thru-hiked from Georgia, 2,190 miles. This was her final mile, her triumph. The weather was perfect, clear skies, moderate temperature. She started her summit push at 8 a.m. Mount Katahdin's peak stands at 5,267 feet. Lennox checked her altitude meter regularly, training from months of hiking. At 10 a.m., she was at 4,800 feet. By noon, 5,200 feet. Almost there. At 1 p.m., something wrong. 5,400 feet. She was above the summit, but she hadn't reached the peak. The trail continued upward. Lennox stopped, checked her meter multiple times. 5,400 feet. Confirmed. But Mount Katahdin doesn't go that high. She was experiencing altitude sickness, hallucinating. The meter was malfunctioning, except she felt fine, clear-headed, strong. She looked up the trail. It continued switchbacking upward, and above, the peak, clearly visible, still higher, still ahead, impossible. She'd studied this mountain, memorized the trail. She should be at the summit. Unless... Lennox looked back down the trail. The valley below, towns, lakes, roads, all visible, all normal. Then she looked up again. The sky was darker above her, not storm clouds, just darker, like she was approaching the edge of atmosphere. Her altitude meter, 5,600 feet, she was climbing. The trail was rising beneath her even as she stood still. Lennox turned around, started descending. This was wrong. Summit fever, hypoxia, something. After 10 minutes of descending, she checked her meter. 6,000 feet. Going down increased her altitude. She stopped, stood perfectly still, watched the meter. The numbers climbed. 6,100, 6,200, 6,300. She was rising. The mountain was growing. Or she was being pulled upward, or the trail was ascending independent of the terrain. The air thinned. Her breathing became labored. At this elevation, she should be above Mount Washington's peak, the highest point in the northeast. She looked down. The valley was tiny now, ant-sized cars on thread-thin roads. And between her and the valley, clouds. She was above cloud level. Mount Katahdin doesn't penetrate cloud level, 7,000 feet, now equal to mid-range Rockies peaks, 8,000 feet, alpine zone. No vegetation, just stone. The trail continued, carved impossibly into rock that didn't exist on any map. Lennox's training said, descend immediately. Altitude sickness kills. Get to lower elevation. But descending made her climb higher. She tried going off trail, scrambling down the mountainside directly. Within minutes, she was back on the trail, like the mountain wouldn't let her leave the path. 10,000 feet, her vision spotted, her fingers tingled. Altitude sickness setting in. She had supplemental oxygen in her pack. For emergencies, she'd brought it as a precaution. Never thought she'd need it on a 5,000-foot mountain. She used it now. The oxygen helped, cleared her head, but didn't stop the ascending. 12,000 feet, above Guadalupe Peak, above half the mountains in the lower 48. The sky was navy blue now. Stars visible during daylight. The sun bright but not warm. The air so thin each breath barely sustained her. And still the trail climbed. Lennox considered her options. Keep going up until she died of exposure, or altitude sickness? Or what? There was no or. The trail only went one direction. She pulled out her satellite communicator, pressed SOS. The device showed, signal sent, help dispatched. But how would help reach her? She was at an elevation that didn't exist, on a trail that wasn't on maps, climbing a mountain that had decided to grow, 14,000 feet, now equal to Colorado 14ers. Lennox's supplemental oxygen was half gone. The trail finally leveled. Ahead, a summit, not Katahdin's familiar peak, something else, a plateau of smooth stone. In the center of the plateau, a cairn. Trail marker stones stacked by previous hikers, except this cairn was massive, 20 feet tall, stones perfectly balanced in a spiral pattern that hurt to look at, geometry that didn't follow normal physical rules. And around the cairn, gear, backpacks, dozens of them, from different eras, 1980s external frame packs, 2000s internal frames, modern ultralight gear, all abandoned, all arranged in a circle around the impossible cairn. Lennox approached slowly. Each pack had a name tag, trail names. Strider, Wanderer, Seeker, Nomad, all through hikers, all who'd reached this place, none who'd left. She found a pack with a journal inside, open to the last entry. Day 187. Reached Katahdin. Trail continues. Climbing for 3 hours. Altitude 15,000 feet now. Can't stop ascending. If you find this, don't follow the trail higher than the summit. Turn back. The mountain chooses who gets to leave. I wasn't chosen. The date, 2019. 4 years ago. Lennox's meter, 15,500 feet, above most peaks in the contiguous United States. Her oxygen was nearly gone. She had a choice. Add her pack to the circle and join the others who'd stayed. Or find a way down that wasn't the trail. She chose neither. Instead, she walked to the edge of the plateau, looked down. Below, the entire Northeast. Cities like dots, rivers like threads, and far, far below, the normal peak of Mount Katahdin, where she should have been. This impossible plateau floated above real space, disconnected, a destination without a return. Lennox did the only thing that made sense. She jumped, not to die, to fall, to reject the ascending trail. To choose down, even if the trail wouldn't let her. She fell through cold air, wind screaming, her stomach in her throat. Falling from an elevation that shouldn't exist toward a mountain that was smaller than where she'd been. She fell for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours and landed, hard, on stone, on the real summit of Mount Katahdin, 5,267 feet. Her altitude meter confirmed it. Her body confirmed it. She was on the actual peak, at the correct elevation. Around her, other hikers, celebrating, taking photos. Normal summit day. They stared at her. "Where did you come from? We've been here 20 minutes. You weren't here. Then you just appeared." Lennox looked up. The sky was normal blue. No darkness, no stars, no ascending trail visible. But for just a moment, she saw it, a gap in the air above the summit. A doorway, leading to that impossible plateau. It closed, sealed, gone. Lennox signed the summit register, completed her through hike, descended normally. She never told anyone about the ascending trail. They'd think altitude sickness, hallucination. But she knows the truth. Mount Katahdin has 2 peaks. One that everyone reaches, and one that some people are pulled toward. An impossible elevation. A destination for those the mountain chooses. A place where the trail never ends because the climbing never stops. Mira Calderon trekked into Utah's Red Rock Labyrinth for a week of solitude and problem-solving climbs. The swell wasn't the safest choice for a lone climber, but the silence called to her. She arrived just before sunset, mapping her routes, noting every shadow cast by the fading sun. That first evening, the rocks were ordinary enough. By night's edge, Mira noticed something strange. The arrangement of the stones shifted by a few inches, then by a few feet, with no wind to move them. A trick of the eye? She reminded herself to trust her senses and her camera. On the second day, Mira followed the subtle trail of shifts. The rocks moved again. This time, not just their positions, but their face-like indentations seemed to rearrange. The circle tightened. Her compass spun. Her GPS blinked out, only to return with a jagged readout. You are in unknown terrain. The rocks didn't just occupy space. They occupied attention. They demanded caution, and Mira honored that demand, for now. The canyon kept its secrets, and she kept moving, documenting every shift, every tremor, every silent cue the rocks offered. The mountain didn't forget her. She didn't forget it. When Mira attempted to retreat, the rock shifted in a way that blocked the path. The terrain itself seemed to close ranks. She pivoted, choosing a route deeper into the canyon, certain she could emerge where she started. The moment she pressed on, the stones settled into a formation that looked almost ceremonial, as if inviting her to complete a ritual she didn't want to finish. Night deepens. Mira sits on a rock ledge, signs of wear around her climbing harness. The rock circle behind her pulses faintly, as if a heartbeat runs through the stone. The camera captures her face in the glow of a small headlamp. Her expression is a mix of resolve and unease. A whispering wind carries a whisper that could be a name, one you almost recognize but can't place. Mira set a timer on her phone, counting down a silent interval that felt like a different kind of clock. When the alarm finally sounded, she stood, shouldered her pack, and stepped away from the rock circle. The air thickened, and a final tremor rippled through the canyon walls. As though the entire place exhaled in unison. Mira exits the canyon as twilight shifts into night. The rocks recede behind her into ordinary formation, but the memory of their watchful stillness remains. She snaps a last photo, posts it online with a caption that hints at a mystery, and continues her journey, carrying the weight of what she witnessed. Irene Hale booked a solo camping trip in a remote stretch of the Pacific Northwest to unplug and write. The listing promised solitude, flawless scenery, and days of uninterrupted silence. The first 2 nights delivered exactly that. Then something changed. On the 3rd morning, she found the campsite arranged differently than she remembered. A mug missing, a compass left open with the needle spinning, footprints leading to the edge of the clearing and abruptly stopping at a line of ferns. No other signs of life. That night, Irene woke to a whisper of voices carried on the wind, indistinct yet intimate, as if someone were speaking directly into her ear, but far away. The whispering grew louder in the deep woods, circling the camp in a way that felt almost intentional, like a gathering rather than random sounds. Morning came with a stillness that felt unnatural. The map Irene had laid out the day before had changed. The routes on the page now twisted into unfamiliar shapes, and one path, clearly drawn, pointed deeper into the forest where no trail existed on any map she had seen. She followed it, thinking she'd reach a landmark or a clearing she'd recognize. Instead, the trees closed in. Branches bent as though the forest itself didn't want her there. The footprints in the moss continued, but they led nowhere, circling back toward her campsite from the wrong direction. When the sun slipped behind the pines, Irene returned to the clearing to find her own footprints erased. The campfire's embers glowed faintly, as if someone had recently tended it, though she was alone. On the log lay a fresh, damp note written in a hurried hand. "If you want to leave, follow the trail that chooses you." The note bore no name. The next morning, the forest seemed to breathe with her. The trees rustled a little too intensely when she moved. A pack of unseen animals rustled at the edge of sight. It felt less like wildlife and more like something watching from all angles, waiting for her to blink. That night, a second note appeared, pinned to the map with a pine needle. It read, "The last campsite isn't the end, it's a doorway." Irene tried to disregard it, but the implication gnawed at her. She slept with a hatchet within arm's reach, a flashlight angled toward the trees, and the journal she'd been writing in tucked under her pillow. As dawn approached, Irene realized something chilling. The forest had stopped hiding. It had begun revealing. On a log near the fire, something had carved a circle of footprints, hers, inside a larger circle made by another set, exactly like a watermark. The forest wasn't just following her, it was copying her, making duplicates of herself and her belongings, as if to say, "This space belongs to us now." With night tightening its grip, Irene made a decision. She would leave by the fastest route, even if it meant abandoning her work and gear. She packed quickly, grabbing only the essentials. But every move she made, the forest mirrored it. Every motion duplicated on the opposite side of the clearing. When she stepped toward the trees, a second version stepped from the shadows and mirrored her stance. Perfectly synchronized, she pivoted and bolted toward the edge of the forest. The sound of footsteps followed. Not from behind her, but from every side at once, as if dozens of Irene proxies were converging. She burst into the undergrowth, lungs burning, and finally broke through onto a narrow service road that ran behind the campsite. The road led back towards civilization, but as she emerged, she found the landscape hadn't returned to ordinary. The trees along the road were aggregated so tightly that they formed a green wall at the edge of the pavement, every trunk a silhouette against the moon. She could hear a distant, faint laugh that wasn't hers. It sounded genuine, full of mischief and threat. The road stretched ahead, and beyond the trees she could see headlights cutting through the night. A signal of safety, yet the forest's whisper insisted she wasn't done. The road curved away, and the glow of streetlights vanished into an impenetrable dark. The last image Irene carried with her was the map again, kicked into the dirt by her boot. The line that pointed toward safety had drawn itself into a circle, a closed loop that looked eerily like a camera's lens, as if the woods were watching through a glass. There's no grand exit. There's only the choice of stepping back into the trees or staying on a road that leads nowhere. Irene stepped onto the road. The screen fades to black with the sound of wind folding through branches and the last whisper, "If you want to leave, follow the trail that chooses you." This is the Nightmare Index, case file 007. Now closed. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and enable notifications so you don't miss any of our stories.